I put forward an approach to planning based on three principles: community-led, levelling-up-led and environment-led, and I commend these to ministers. I'm going to outline some concerns, if I may, at first. Reform, I believe, is better than scrapping and starting again. I believe that scrapping threatens to misdiagnose the problem, Madam Chair. 9 in 10 planning applications are approved, only 60% of permissions are built, over 1 million unbuilt permissions in the decade. And the basic fact is that we have a flawed market. The building cartels, who build the majority of homes, restrict supply. This is not a secret, it is in their building model. But they act to prevent prices falling. That is why using house building alone, or house building predominantly, to try to lower the price will not work. Secondly, the standard method damages the levelling up agenda. And this is critical, especially given the Prime Minister's excellent speech today. I believe that levelling up is a moral and economic imperative. It's also a political imperative for this government. But a flawed planning bill will undermine that levelling up process. And I think there are some Red Wall colleagues who are now beginning to see this. As Knight Frank reported, the current methodology, the standard method, the current methodology systematically disadvantages poorer parts of the country, particularly in the North and Midlands. So the North has 23% of the nation's population, but its housing need is estimated at not even 16% of the total, and its share of public expenditure on housing is barely 18% of the total. The Housing Infrastructure Fund spends £115 per head in the east of England and an astonishing low £4, it's 115 versus £4 in Yorkshire. The standard method directs investment away from levelling up communities. It heats up the already hot and it cools down those people who need to be cooking on gas, if you pardon the analogy. I know that other people will talk about the potential loss of democracy and other concerns, so I will not dwell too much on them because I want to focus on one or two specific issues. But it is clear, talking to colleagues, Madam Chair, that there is much variation in people's concerns. For some it's green fields, damage to tourism, quality of life, for others suburban density, for others building height, for others the absolute absurdity of building on floodplains, for others it's a system which is simply not delivering affordable homes. On the Isle of Wight, I would just say that there is a slight frustration here that opponents of reform, well, opponents of scrapping the system rather than reforming it, are sometimes being portrayed as NIMBYs. On the island, on the Isle of Wight, we've been YIMBYs for 50 years. We've been in our backyard. We've increased our population by 50% in 50 years. And in that time, the cities of Newcastle, Sunderland, Hull, Liverpool, Manchester, Blackpool, Birmingham, Stoke have all declined, not relatively declined, but declined in absolute percentage and numbers. So when people say that opponents of a developer-led system in the South are NIMBYs, I would respectfully argue that they acquaint themselves with some basic facts about the history of development that has taken place in this country since World War II. We have barely no new infrastructure on the Isle of Wight, and our key gas supplies, water and electricity interconnectors are already operating at near capacity. So what are the solutions? And I do want most of the speech to be a positive. I want to look at our three principles, and I want to suggest maybe a dozen, 15 ideas in the time I have available. Some of them are clearly community-led, some of them are environment-led, some are levelling-up-led, but they all gel together to look at ways that we can support the Minister in this important work that he is doing and which we want to support. Our reform should be, first, enshrine the ability to object to individual planning applications. Secondly, give greater weight to reform neighbourhood plans. Thirdly, outlaw gazumping. We know that communities with neighbourhood plans, Madam Chair, accept higher housing allocations because they see what's in it for them. We know that gazumping slows down the market and imposes costs. Democracy and good law, good democracy, help good development. Levelling up. There are many things one could say, but I'll just stick to one. We need to fundamentally reform the standard model, and we need, as an act of deliberate policy, to redirect infrastructure funding and the jobs and the house building jobs to levelling up areas as a deliberate act of policy. Because without that, we are going to have to explain to our voters in a few years' time while all that infrastructure funding, or so much of it, is going down south. And it won't be a pretty conversation, either with southern colleagues, and voters, or indeed red wall and levelling up communities. Finally, a series of ideas to link to the environment. We need to end the use of lazy greenfield development. And I know ministers want that, but I think it would be great if they could want it more. We need a recycling culture in land use. I'm aware that some good ideas in the white paper about infrastructure levies, but it needs to price in the true cost of using up very valuable, rare greenfield land. And for many areas, I fear that is going to be a markedly higher price that will be factored into the bill. We need, in short, Madam Chair, to change the economics of land use. We need a greenfield tax, so that money goes into brownfield cleanup in a dedicated way. So if we are using, and especially in a place like the Isle of Wight, if we are using rare greenfield land, we need to get a greater good out of it than Persimmon's bottom line. We need to zero-rate brownfield development and encourage it and build in financial incentives for brownfield, especially small-scale brownfield, in small towns and small communities to make it work. There are many loopholes that I could suggest closing, but I won't given the time. I would just say we need greater powers of compulsory purchase to force people to act more quickly. The Isle of Wight Council would love, the Isle of Wight Council, there's 600 unused and derelict properties on the Isle of Wight. If he wants to get 600 extra properties on the Isle of Wight, give the Isle of Wight Council more power, make it easier for us to enforce action on derelict and unused properties, so to force sale or to force rent or to force use. Introduce a character test to screen out dodgy developers. If he wants to clean up the system, let him be the sheriff that gets rid of cowboy developers. Buyers who take homes, and I think this was suggested by a colleague who's going to be speaking to us very shortly, buyers who take homes and turn them into Airbnb or holiday homes should be required to have change of use by councils. Councils should be allowed to frame localised plans to reverse and lower the percentage of long-term holiday and commercial holiday rentals in specific communities. We help, Madam Chair, first-time buyers, so why not last-time sellers? With stamp duty exemption, and it will cost money, 1 in 5 over 65s would be, according to facts and figures, more likely to move. That could affect 2 million people, £900 billion worth of property, helping to free up the market and allow market-driven solutions where there isn't market failure. Clearly there is an element here. Finally, land banking. If we want to boost supply, we need to create a use it or lose it rule for permissions within a realistic time bracket. And that means more than starting a development by digging a trench 6 foot by 6. It means agreeing a start date means agreeing just that, and making council tax payable on all property after a given date, on all plots after a given date, regardless of whether they are built or not. If the purpose of the planning bill is to help developers, these ideas are not going to be attractive to many of them. But if the purpose of the Minister's housing bill and planning bill, and I'm sure it is going to be to get people into homes, to help first-time buyers, these ideas and many others suggested by colleagues are going to help him produce a markedly better planning bill, or a planning bill that is as good and as attractive as all of us want it to be. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, thank you for your tactful cough. We need solid principles behind the planning bill. Community-led, levelling up-led, critically, environment-led. We need to be sensitive to local democracy. We need a levelling up agenda that spreads prosperity and hope around our country. And in environment-led, we have got to move away from unsustainable, lazy, car-dependent, carbon-inefficient greenfield development, and we need to build for communities in communities. Thank you.